Dr. Amanda Hayes stared at her coffee mug through bleary eyes, wondering if the lack of sleep was finally getting to her. The ceramic cup, decorated with cartoon quantum particles that had seemed amusing when she'd bought it, was definitely flickering. Not like a bad fluorescent light or a glitchy hologram. It was phasing in and out of existence. "Jenny," she called out to her lab assistant, not taking her eyes off the cup. "Are you seeing this?" But Jenny had left hours ago, like any sane person would at 3 a.m. The Breakthrough Propulsion Laboratory was empty except for Amanda and her increasingly unstable quantum entanglement experiment. The matrix of specialized sensors surrounding her workstation hummed with an odd resonance she'd never heard before. The mug vanished completely. Amanda lunged for her tablet, fingers flying across the surface as she tried to capture every reading. The quantum field measurements were off the charts, showing patterns that defied everything she knew about particle physics. Where the mug had been, her instruments detected nothing. Not empty space, not a vacuum. Actual nothingness. The mug reappeared 2 feet to the left, coffee still steaming. "Holy shit," she whispered, her heart pounding. She'd been studying quantum entanglement's potential applications in propulsion technology for years, but this was something else entirely. Her experimental setup had somehow created a space where matter could step sideways out of reality. The lab's main computer chimed with an urgent alert. The background quantum field sensors were picking up similar phenomena at various points around Earth, tiny spots where reality seemed to thin out momentarily. She'd accidentally discovered something that existed naturally, something that might explain countless mysterious disappearances and quantum oddities throughout history. Amanda reached for her phone, then hesitated. This kind of discovery would change everything. She needed to document it properly before. The lab's security doors hissed open. 2 men in dark suits walked in, followed by a military officer wearing Air Force insignia. They moved with the purposeful stride of people who'd been expecting to be here. "Dr. Amanda Hayes," the officer asked, though it wasn't really a question. "I'm Colonel Richards. We need to talk about what you just discovered." "How did you?" Amanda gestured at her equipment, still recording data from an experiment she'd only started a few hours ago. "We've been monitoring certain quantum signatures for years," Colonel Richards said. "What you just found? We call it a void signature. We've never been able to generate one artificially until now." The colonel pulled up a chair, his expression grave. "Doctor, we're about to have a very classified conversation about Project Phantom. But first, you need to know why we're in such a hurry." He nodded to one of the suited men, who projected a hologram showing what looked like long-range sensor data. Amanda's scientific curiosity momentarily overcame her shock. That's not natural orbital movement. Those are ships." "Yes, an armada of them, detected just beyond Pluto's orbit. They're not ours, and they're not friendly." The colonel's face was grim. "We've been preparing for this possibility since we first detected void signatures, but we're running out of time. Your breakthrough couldn't have come at a more critical moment." Amanda looked at her innocent coffee mug, still sitting where it had reappeared. "You want to weaponize this. We want to survive, Doctor. And right now, your accidental discovery might be humanity's best shot." Colonel Richards stood up. "Will you help us?" The quantum sensors chirped again, showing another natural void signature forming somewhere over the Pacific. Amanda thought about all the implications, all the physics papers she'd never get to publish, all the theories she'd have to develop in secret. Then she thought about those ships, coming closer every day. "When do we start?" The colonel smiled for the first time. "We already have a lab set up. Grab whatever data you need. We're leaving now. And Doctor," he glanced at the coffee mug, "bring that too. Sometimes the simplest tests are the most revealing." Commander Jack Torres watched through reinforced glass as another pilot candidate was wheeled to medical, screaming about geometries that shouldn't exist. "Third one this week. The void simulator was taking its toll, and they were running out of time. We're killing them, Dr. Hayes said beside him, her fingers drumming nervously on her tablet. 6 months into Project Phantom, and the dark circles under her eyes had become permanent features. Their minds can't process what they're seeing in there. Show me, Torres said. Jack, you're not cleared for. I'm about to put more pilots through that machine. Show me what they're seeing. Amanda hesitated, then pulled up the neural feedback data on her tablet. The display showed fragments of what the pilots experienced in void space. Impossible angles, dimensions folding in on themselves, spaces that existed between spaces, reality seen through a shattered mirror, with each fragment showing a different version of truth. Jesus, Torres whispered. That's just the sanitized data, the raw feed. Amanda shook her head. Human brains aren't wired to comprehend it. We're three-dimensional creatures trying to process something that exists in, well, we're not even sure how many dimensions. Torres studied the patterns, forcing himself to look at the maddening geometries. But you found a way around it, haven't you? That's why you called me here. Amanda's tired face lit up with a familiar excitement. Remember my coffee mug? The first object we sent through. It didn't go crazy because it doesn't have a mind to break. So I started thinking, what if we could give our pilots a buffer? Something to translate void space into something comprehensible. She led him to her lab, where a sleek neural interface sat on a workbench. It looked like a cross between a pilot's helmet and a medical device, covered in quantum sensors and neural links. It creates a sort of mental heads-up display, she explained. Instead of trying to process void space directly, the pilot sees symbolic representations. Their brain fills in the gaps with something it can understand. Have you tested it? Amanda's silence was answer enough. Torres picked up the helmet. Boot it up. Jack, no. We haven't even run preliminary. That's an order, Doctor. Our long-range sensors show the Krythrax fleet accelerating. We don't have time for preliminary anything. Amanda's hands shook as she calibrated the interface. Torres sat in the simulation chair, feeling the neural links connect as the helmet powered up. The void simulator hummed to life. The world dissolved. He expected madness. Instead, he saw an ocean. Deep, dark water stretching in every direction, but water he somehow knew wasn't water. Currents of possibility flowed around him, showing paths through the void. When he focused on one, he could feel how to move through it, how to slip his ship between the spaces where space itself didn't exist. Jack, your vitals are spiking. We need tow. I can see it, he breathed. It's beautiful. The simulation ended, leaving him drained but sane. Amanda was already reviewing the data, her expression shifting from concern to triumph. This could work, she said. Your brain interpreted void space as an ocean, created a metaphor it could understand. Different pilots might see different things, but they'll be able to navigate it, Torres finished. He stood up, fighting off a wave of dizziness. How fast can you make more? 12 interfaces, maybe 2 weeks. But Jack, she grabbed his arm. The void does something to the pilots, changes them. Even with the interface, prolonged exposure. I'm not sure what it'll do to you. Torres thought of the Krythrax fleet, of Earth's 12 experimental ships waiting in orbit, of all the pilots who'd already broken themselves trying to master this technology. Whatever it does to us, he said, it's better than what those aliens will do to Earth. He headed for the door. I'll have your first batch of pilots ready tomorrow. Make them see the ocean, Doctor. Make them see anything but madness. And if the interface itself starts changing them. Torres paused at the door. Then let's hope it changes us into something strong enough to win this fight. The holographic display aboard the UES Ghostwalker cast an eerie glow across the bridge as Supreme War Leader Extract's transmission played. The alien commander's segmented carapace gleamed with ceremonial oils, 4 arms gesturing dramatically as he detailed the fate of 30 conquered civilizations. And so shall Earth fall, the translation software rendered. as all primitives must bow before the Krythrax dominion. Commander Torres glanced at his crew. 12 humans wearing neural interfaces that pulsed with quantum-sensitive lights. 12 minds already partly changed by their training in void space. In the pilot's chair, Lieutenant Sarah Cooper's eyes had that distant look they all got when perceiving the layers of reality others couldn't see. "Sir," Cooper said quietly, "permission to respond to their hospitality." Torres smiled. "Show them the flag, Lieutenant." Cooper closed her eyes. To her, the void had always appeared as a vast desert, with dooms of probability shifting in dimensional winds. She reached out through her neural interface, feeling the Ghostwalker's void drive harmonize with her thoughts. Reality rippled. Aboard the Krythrax flagship, alarms blared as sensors detected an impossible energy signature. The massive bridge, nearly the size of a football field, suddenly had a human ship hovering in its center. Extract's mandibles clicked in shock as the small vessel hung there, defying physics and sanity. A side hatch opened, and a spacesuited figure emerged. With deliberate ceremony, they planted a United Earth flag into the deck plating of the alien bridge. The figure saluted, climbed back into their ship, and both vessel and human vanished as though they'd never existed. The bridge erupted in chaos. Guards fired weapons at empty air. Sensor operators screamed conflicting readings. Extract's carapace flushed deep crimson with rage. Back aboard the Ghostwalker, Cooper was grinning as she opened her eyes. "Flag planted, sir. You should have seen their faces." "Oh, we did," Torres assured her, watching the feed from her suit camera. "Dr. Hayes, are you seeing this telemetry?" In her lab back on Earth, Amanda Hayes was already analyzing the data. The void signature is cleaner than ever. Sarah's neural pattern. It's not just interpreting the void anymore. She's starting to understand it. They all are. Torres watched his pilot, noting how the lights in her neural interface had changed color. "Cooper, what did you see in there?" "Not the desert. What was behind it?" Her smile faded. "Patterns, sir. Like the void is written in some kind of language. The more we dive into it, the more I think someone's been there before. Someone who learned to write in spaces that don't exist." Before Torres could respond, Tactical lit up with warnings. The Krythrax fleet was moving into attack formation, their giant ships arranging themselves in complex three-dimensional patterns. "They're powering up weapons across the fleet," Tactical reported. "Standard containment formation. They think they can box us in." Torres keyed the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, execute Operation Ghostance. Show them why you can't box in something that doesn't play by the rules of normal space." 11 acknowledgments came back instantly. Through their neural interfaces, his pilots could feel each other at the edges of perception. 12 minds preparing to dance through impossible spaces. "One more thing," Torres added. "If you see any patterns in the void, any signs of writing, log it. Earth isn't going to be primitive for much longer." The Krythrax fleet opened fire, energy weapons, and gravitational distorters targeting the small human formation. But the void had already claimed the Earth ships, leaving the aliens to rage at phantoms. The real battle was about to begin, and humanity's greatest advantage wasn't their technology. It was that they had sent their ships out expecting to find something new, to learn and adapt. The Krythrax, for all their advanced weapons, were still thinking in straight lines. And as Lieutenant Cooper had seen, the void didn't do straight lines. It rode in curves that bent through dimensions, in ancient patterns waiting to be read by minds brave enough or foolish enough to look beyond the boundaries of normal space. The dance of phantoms was about to begin. Junior Sensor Operator Kovacs hunched over his station aboard the Krythrax support vessel Eternal Victory, his antennae twitching as he tracked the impossible movements of the human ships. Something about their pattern nagged at his analytical mind. "Supreme Commander," he chittered nervously, "I'm detecting a mathematical sequence in there." Silence. Sub-Commander Vertak snapped, his carapace plates clicking in irritation. "They are merely random jumps. The primitives got lucky with their void technology, nothing more. But Kivix couldn't shake the feeling as he watched the sensor feeds. The human vessels weren't just appearing and disappearing randomly. They were writing something across four-dimensional space, using the void itself as their canvas. He began plotting each emergence point, converting the coordinates into a geometric pattern. Aboard the Ghostwalker, Lieutenant Cooper guided her ship through the desert of her void perception, but now she could see what lay beneath the dunes. Ancient symbols flickered at the edges of reality, and she was learning to read them. "Commander," she called out, her voice distant as her mind straddled multiple dimensions. "I think I understand what we're supposed to do. The void. It's like sheet music. We need to follow the harmony." Torres watched as his fleet executed their seemingly random attacks, each ship phasing in to deliver precise strikes before vanishing again. But through his neural interface, he was beginning to see what Cooper meant. They weren't just attacking. They were resonating with something fundamental to the structure of space-time itself. "Dr. Hayes," he subvocalized through his neural link, "are you seeing this pattern?" In her lab, Amanda's eyes widened as she overlaid the fleet's movement data with her quantum field analysis. "My God," she breathed. "They're not just using the void tunnels. They're creating new ones. The attacks are changing the quantum structure of local space." Kivix's hands trembled as he completed his analysis. The humans weren't appearing at random coordinates. They were following a complex mathematical sequence that seemed to fold space itself into new configurations. Each attack was adding to the pattern, building towards something larger. He turned to shout a warning to his commander, but it was too late. The trap closed. All 12 human ships emerged simultaneously, their positions forming a perfect geometric pattern around the Krythrax fleet. But this time, they didn't vanish. Instead, ripples of distortion spread between them like cosmic spiderwebs. "Now," Torres ordered. Cooper and her fellow pilots reached out through their neural interfaces, no longer fighting against the void's strange geometries, but working with them. The pattern they'd written into space activated, and reality shuddered. The Krythrax fleet found themselves trapped in a bubble of distorted spacetime. Their weapons fire moved in slow motion, their communications reduced to barely audible whispers as time itself became fluid and unreliable within the affected zone. "This is Commander Torres to all Krythrax vessels." Torres transmitted on all frequencies. "We've created a localized time dilation field using void space calculations. You're currently experiencing time at roughly 1,000th of normal speed. We can maintain this for approximately 6 hours, or what will feel like 8 months to you." Kivix watched in horror as his sensor readings confirmed the human's words. Somehow, these primitives had weaponized the mathematics of reality itself. "We'll give you 10 minutes, subjectively, about 4 days, to consider your situation," Torres continued. "You can either retreat or spend what will feel like 8 months watching your own weapons fire crawl through space while we pick you apart at our leisure." In her lab, Amanda watched the data streams with a mixture of awe and concern. The neural interfaces were showing unprecedented levels of integration. Her pilots weren't just reading the void's patterns anymore. They were becoming part of them. "Jack," she whispered through their private channel, "what are we becoming?" Torres looked at Cooper, saw the alien geometries reflecting in her eyes as she maintained the time dilation field, and wondered the same thing. But right now, they had a battle to win. And somewhere in the void, ancient patterns stirred, awakening after eons of sleep. Supreme War Leader Xthrak had never faced defeat in 3 centuries of conquest. The humiliation burned through his carapace like acid as he gave the order, "Deploy the planet killers." Massive weapon arrays unfolded from the Krythrax capital ships, each capable of reducing a world to molten slag. The humans had shown remarkable void space mastery, but surely they couldn't protect an entire planet. Targeting computers locked onto Earth, visible as a blue jewel in the distance. "Sir," Lieutenant Cooper's voice cracked with urgency on the Ghostwalker's bridge. "They're powering up gravitic beams. Energy readings are off the scale." Commander Taurus didn't hesitate. Execute mirrors of Neptune. All ships, coordinate your void signatures precisely. Cooper, you're conducting. Sarah Cooper closed her eyes, but what she saw through her neural interface was far from darkness. The void had become a symphony of light and geometry to her altered perception. She could feel the other pilots through quantum entanglement, their minds harmonizing like an orchestra. The void is alive, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she spoke with her voice or her thoughts anymore. It wants to help us. The planet killer beams lanced out from the Krythrax fleet, rivers of destructive energy that could crack a world. But they never reached Earth. Instead, they met a lattice of void space apertures, carefully woven between dimensions by the human fleet. Dr. Hayes watched from her lab, her screens displaying energy patterns she'd never dreamed possible. They're not just redirecting the beams, she breathed. They're restructuring the quantum foundation of the weapons themselves. The pilots worked in perfect synchronization, their neural interfaces glowing with otherworldly light. Each void aperture caught a planet-killer beam and twisted it through dimensions the Krythrax had never imagined, before spitting it back out at their own fleet. Xthrak watched in horror as his own weapons turned against him, their energy somehow amplified by their journey through the void. Ships began to break apart, their supposedly impenetrable shields useless against weapons that hit them from angles that shouldn't exist. "Status report," he demanded. "Impossible," his science officer responded, mandibles trembling. "They're using our own attack as a power source, feeding it through some kind of dimensional loop. The energy readings are beyond anything in our records." Torres felt the change through his neural interface, a subtle shift in the fabric of reality itself. "Cooper, what are you seeing?" "Everything, sir." Cooper's voice had taken on a melodic quality, as if she were speaking in harmony with herself. "The void doesn't just exist between spaces. It's the foundation of everything. And there's something in there, something old, something that's been waiting for minds that could perceive it." The battle had become a dance of light and shadow, with human ships phasing in and out of normal space to plant quantum-locked explosives that detonated across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Krythrax fleet, for all its technological might, was fighting an enemy that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. Amanda Hayes studied the neural readings with growing concern. The interfaces were showing unprecedented levels of integration, the pilot's brainwave patterns increasingly synchronized with something that her instruments could barely detect. "Jack," she called over their secure channel. "The void is changing them faster now. Whatever they're connecting within there, it's accelerating the process." "No time to stop now," Torres responded, watching another Krythrax capital ship break apart under its own redirected energy. "But I see it too. There's something about those patterns, something familiar. Like we've known them all along but forgot how to read them." Through her desert void perception, Cooper conducted the fleet's deadly symphony. But beneath the dunes, beneath the patterns of light and geometry, she could feel something vast stirring. The void wasn't just a space between spaces, it was the original space, the foundation upon which reality itself had been built. And it had been waiting for them. The ancient patterns weren't just writing anymore. They were singing. Lieutenant Cooper floated in her desert of quantum probabilities, but now each grain of sand was a note in a vast cosmic symphony. Through her neural interface, she could feel the other pilots joining the chorus, their minds resonating with frequencies that existed between the moments of normal time. "Dr. Hayes," she transmitted, her voice harmonizing with subspatial frequencies, "I need you to see this." In her lab, Amanda Hayes watched as Cooper's neural feed displayed patterns that shouldn't have been possible. "Sarah, your brain activity. It's operating in 5-dimensional space. All of you are." "Not just us," Cooper replied. "Look at the void signatures." "Really look." Amanda adjusted her quantum sensors, pushing them beyond their designed limits. What she saw made her stumble backward. The void wasn't empty. It was filled with geometric patterns that predated the universe itself, a framework upon which reality had been built. "Jack," she called to Torres. "They're not just seeing the void anymore. They're seeing what's been hiding in it." On the Ghostwalker's bridge, Torres felt it too. His neural interface showed him impossible things. Vast structures existing between microseconds, ancient machines that functioned in dimensions humans had never known existed, and through it all, those patterns, now clearly some kind of code left by beings who had mastered the void eons ago. "Sir," Tactical called out, "the Krithrax are attempting to break formation. They're trying to time-shift their weapons." The alien fleet had adapted, their energy weapons now phasing through different temporal states to bypass the humans' void defenses. Xthrak had ordered every ship to fire simultaneously, creating a web of destructive energy that existed across multiple moments in time. Cooper laughed, the sound echoing strangely through quantum space. "They still don't understand. Time isn't what they think it is." She reached out through her neural interface, connecting with the other pilots. Together, they began to translate the void's ancient patterns into something their transformed minds could use. Reality shuddered as they rewrote the local laws of physics. The Krithrax weapons fire froze in space, not through technology, but because time itself had been locally rewritten. Cooper and her fellow pilots had learned to read the universe's source code, and they were beginning to make edits. "My God," Amanda whispered, watching the data streams. "They're not just using the void technology anymore. They're becoming part of the void itself. The neural interfaces have evolved beyond anything we designed." Torres watched as his pilots worked in perfect harmony. Their consciousness expanded into realms he could barely glimpse even through his own interface. The Krithrax fleet hung helpless in their distorted bubble of spacetime, their mighty weapons reduced to elegant but useless light sculptures in the void. "Cooper," he called out, "status report." "We understand now, sir," she replied, her voice overlapping with itself as it crossed dimensional boundaries. "The void isn't a weapon or a tool. It's the space where reality is written. The beings who came before, they weren't trying to hide their secrets. They were leaving instructions." Through the neural interface network, Torres felt the truth of her words. The ancient patterns were a manual, a guide left behind by some long-vanished civilization that had discovered the void and transformed themselves through it. Now, humanity was following in their footsteps, guided by the very structure of the universe itself. "Dr. Hayes," he transmitted, "are we still human?" Amanda studied the neural readings, watching as her pilots' minds operated in dimensional spaces that shouldn't have been possible. "I think," she said slowly, "we're becoming what humans were always meant to be. The void isn't changing them. It's awakening something that was already there." In her desert of quantum possibilities, Cooper began to understand. The patterns weren't just instructions. They were an invitation, and humanity had just RSVP'd to the universe's oldest party. Supreme War Leader Xthrak felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries of conquest: fear. His mighty armada hung helpless in space, their weapons frozen in temporal stasis, while the human ships danced through dimensions his finest scientists couldn't even detect. "Release the containment fields," he ordered, his mandibles clicking in desperate rage. All of them. His second-in-command's carapace paled. "Supreme Leader, the antimatter containment. We'll take their cursed planet with us." Xthrak roared. "Better oblivion than defeat by primitives." Aboard the Ghostwalker, Cooper's eyes snapped open, glowing with void light. "Sir, they're dropping antimatter containment across their entire fleet. The chain reaction will take out half the solar system." Torres felt the void patterns shifting through his neural interface, showing him the cascade of destruction about to unfold. They could save Earth by retreating into void space, but the solar system itself would be devastated. "Dr. Hayes," he called out, "please tell me you have a solution." In her lab, Amanda's fingers flew across holographic displays as she analyzed the quantum readings. The void patterns, they're not just instructions, they're templates. if the pilots can understand them quickly enough. We see it, Cooper interrupted, her voice resonating across multiple dimensional frequencies. Commander, permission to attempt something absolutely insane. Torres looked at his tactical display, watching the antimatter containment fields failing across the Krythrax fleet. They had seconds before physics itself became their enemy. Whatever you're going to do it fast. Cooper reached out through her neural interface, connecting with the other pilots. Together, their expanded consciousness began to translate the ancient void patterns into something unprecedented, a rewriting of local spacetime itself. Dr. Hayes, Cooper transmitted, remember how the first void signature appeared? When your coffee mug existed in two places at once. Amanda's eyes widened. You're not going to. We're going to put the entire Krythrak fleet in a state of quantum superposition, Cooper announced. Half in, half out of void space. Their antimatter reaction can't propagate if it can't decide which reality it's in. Torres felt the void patterns shifting as his pilots began their work. It was like watching reality being edited in real time, the fabric of space-time bending to accommodate human minds that had learned to read its source code. The Krythrax fleet began to flicker, their massive ships taking on a ghostly, translucent quality. Hextrak watched in horror as his sensors reported that his fleet simultaneously existed and didn't exist, trapped between realities by beings who had mastered the fundamental language of the universe. Status, he demanded. Impossible readings, his science officer replied, mandibles trembling. We exist in a state of quantum flux. Our weapons, our antimatter, they can't detonate because they can't determine which reality they're in. These humans, they're rewriting physics itself. Through her neural interface, Cooper conducted her fellow pilots in their reality-bending symphony. The ancient patterns guided them, showing how to hold an entire fleet in dimensional uncertainty without causing a collapse of local spacetime. Sir, she reported, her voice echoing strangely through quantum space, we can hold them like this indefinitely. They're not going anywhere until we decide which reality to make permanent. In her lab, Amanda stared at readings that defied everything she thought she knew about quantum mechanics. Jack, she transmitted to Torres. What they're doing, it's beyond technology. The void patterns aren't just teaching them new physics, they're teaching them how to define physics. Reality itself is becoming optional. Torres watched the ghostly form of the Krythrax fleet, trapped between existence and void space by humans who had evolved beyond the bounds of normal spacetime. Send the message, he ordered. Let's see if they're ready to talk about surrender. The void patterns pulsed with ancient power, recognizing that humanity had passed some cosmic threshold. They had learned to read the universe's oldest language, and now they were learning to write new chapters in it. Extract stared at the transmission request, his pride warring with his instinct for survival. Around his fleet, reality itself waited for humanity's verdict. Supreme War Leader Extract's surrender transmission came in the form of a simple quantum pulse, a submission signal used only twice in the 1,000-year history of the Krythrax dominion. As his fleet hung suspended between realities, he had finally understood. Humanity hadn't just developed new technology, they had evolved into something that transcended traditional definitions of civilization. Release them, Torres ordered, gently. Lieutenant Cooper orchestrated the fleet's return to normal space with the same precision she'd use handling fine crystal. Through her neural interface, reality rippled as the massive alien ships phased back into single quantum states. The void patterns hummed with approval. Humanity had learned not just mastery, but restraint. Dr. Hayes, Cooper transmitted, her voice harmonizing with frequencies that existed between moments. I think you should see the final pattern. The one that's been waiting for us to reach this point. In her lab, Amanda adjusted her quantum sensors to their highest sensitivity. The display showed her something that brought tears to her eyes. A pattern more complex and beautiful than any before, written into the very structure of spacetime. It wasn't just instructions or history. It was an invitation. It's a map, she breathed. No, It's more than that. It's a graduation certificate. Torres felt it through his neural interface. The vast geometric structures hidden in void space were shifting, responding to humanity's achievement. The ancient civilization that had mastered these realms hadn't gone extinct. They had evolved beyond normal space-time entirely. And now they were welcoming humanity to follow their path. "Sir," Cooper called out, her eyes glowing with void light, "the Krathrax Admiral is requesting permission to come aboard. He says he wants to witness what we've become." Minutes later, Xthrak stood on the Ghostwalker's bridge, his massive frame diminished by the weight of revelation. Through specialized sensors, he could see the quantum radiance emanating from the human pilots, beings who had learned to exist partially in normal space and partially in the void. "We thought we were conquering primitive worlds," he clicked softly. "We never understood that we were being tested, that all spacefaring races are being tested." "Not tested," Amanda corrected, entering the bridge with her tablet displaying the final pattern. "Guided. The void signatures I discovered weren't random phenomena. They were breadcrumbs, leading us to understand the true nature of spacetime." Cooper nodded, the desert of her void perception now a garden of quantum possibilities. The beings who came before, they didn't want to simply give us the answers. We had to learn to read reality's source code ourselves. To prove we were ready. "Ready for what?" Xthrak asked, his antennae quivering. Torres gestured to the main viewport, where Earth hummed like a blue jewel. "Ready to take the next step. Humanity's first ships weren't our mighty fleets or advanced weapons. They were our minds, sailing across the quantum seas of possibility. We didn't build more ships because we were learning to become them." Through the neural interfaces, the pilots could feel new patterns emerging. Not ancient ones this time, but patterns they were writing themselves. Humanity's first contributions to the cosmic library of void space. "The war is over," Torres announced, both to his crew and to the waiting forces back on Earth. "But our journey is just beginning. The void isn't empty. It's filled with the knowledge of civilizations that transcended normal spacetime, and now they're waiting to meet us." Amanda looked at her tablet, where the final pattern continued to unfold with infinite complexity. "We'll need to redesign the neural interfaces, learn to understand these new patterns, train more pilots." "Not pilots," Cooper corrected gently. "Explorers. The void doesn't need weapons or warships. It needs minds that can read its stories and write new ones." Xthrak bowed, a gesture that would have been unthinkable hours ago. "We will watch and learn and hope that one day we too will be ready." As the Ghostwalker turned toward Earth, Cooper felt the void patterns shifting again. But this time, they weren't just changing reality. They were changing possibility itself. Humanity had found its place in the cosmic library, and their chapter was just beginning.